or is it different? So I just want to...
Can I ask, thank you very much for your question. Can I ask you with, can I answer you with the next slide?
Okay.
My next slide is specifically on this question. If we understand each other on the idea of a theoretical framework. One of the most important books in the philosophy of science and in philosophy in general is a book published by Thomas Kuhn called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, published in 1964, in which he introduced the concept of paradigm shift. Thomas Kuhn is a university-trained physicist who works during the Second World War with the American Army in Europe on radar technology. Returns to the United States in the 1940s and gets a master's in physics focusing on radar technology, and then is promoted to the elite club of Harvard intellectuals. He's Harvard trained physicist. And while he's there, the vice chancellor of Harvard at the time, James Kuhn, decides to introduce a general philosophy of science course for all the different courses at Harvard. And this tendency now is pretty common in most universities. It's a sort of introduction to general scientific themes. And he asks Kuhn to take care of teaching this discipline. And so what does Kuhn do? Kuhn presents various case studies of the emergence of scientific theories. And then he realizes that when you look at these case studies, it's hard to see a linear progression going through the whole history of science to what is our current scientific framework, our current theoretical framework in science. Meaning, how does one understand exactly the process of going from a universe in which the sun is the center, and then passes to a universe in which the earth is the center, and then passes again to a concept of the universe in which the sun is the center? Because Aristotle presents a heliocentric universe. Then Ptolemy, the scientist, presents a universe based around the earth. And then Copernicus and Galileo will prove that the universe, in fact, the universe at the time, of course, being a very limited concept also, is based around the sun. Right? How does that work? Well, Kuhn will begin to work on the idea of scientific change, or scientific history is based on certain moments of change. And those changes will determine what is the framework in which a whole series of theories emerge. That framework is what he calls a paradigm. Okay? A paradigm is not only a scientific theory. A paradigm also involves the nature of the institutions that arise in a specific historical moment. It's probably a long historical moment in which certain theories begin to dominate the story of the conception of the world. Okay? Now, what Kuhn was interested in the first moment is the idea that in history there occur paradigm shifts. Now, paradigm shift is an expression that today one finds in everywhere. Everywhere. And the source of this idea is in this book. One of the problems, the immediate problem, I think you can probably see, is that if you create a theory of science based on the idea of shifting paradigms, you're saying that scientific truth is not universal. Scientific truth is relative to the paradigm, to the theoretical framework. Of course, this was not very well received by scientists who, even more than philosophical Platonists, believe that they work with the universal laws of nature, or the laws of thermodynamics. And they speak very firmly in terms of laws, not rules or tendencies. So it's a legal language imposed upon the universe. The fact that there's some type of apparent strangeness that an area of normative science, such as law, is used to speak of an area of descriptive truth, such as nature, does not appear to scientists as being somewhat of a contradiction, or at least paradoxical in nature. So Kuhn develops this idea of paradigm, but he doesn't want to merely affirm or assert that truth is relative. Kuhn is not a relativist. And he doesn't even want to really claim that paradigm shifts are good and necessary and always result in something better. What he wants to do is understand what the model that he has created has in terms of a trans-historical content. It can only be formal, right? It can't be contextual, it can't be in terms of content, because the content precisely belongs to the paradigm. Right? But what is the paradigm? So it has these different elements. It has the elements of theories, scientific practices, communities, institutions, relationship between governing bodies, the church, the state, these days the agencies that give accreditation, agencies that give money. And then paradigms will necessarily have moments of uncertainty or even crisis that will emerge. He analyzes various cases of crisis treatment, crisis, what's the expression? Crisis management, exactly. How to prevent the paradigm from shifting. Now, that's what he wants to understand. So this is an example here also in philosophy of why philosophers are so interested in transformation and change. It's important, yes, to understand what the logic of change is, but it's also interesting to find out how to avoid allowing the change, the transformation to occur, particularly if one believes that the crisis emerging is not a fundamental crisis. This is precisely what happens with the scientific revolutions in physics in the first part of the century. I mean, there are some who believe that Einstein's theory of relativity and quantum mechanics, for example, represent a refutation of Newton's laws of motion and physical laws of nature. Others believe it's simply a more specific view made from a broader context, particularly quantum mechanics from a level of the microscopic, right? So how to maintain a certain paradigm, because Newton's laws certainly function within a certain type of delimited perimeter. Okay. So he presents this idea, and this is an idea that I want to suggest is at the heart of our investigation analysis, that of a transformational truth. How are we sure that the truth or the model we're presenting, the newer model we're presenting, will necessarily lead to something better? Well, this is a hard prediction to make, but the knowledge of the theoretical framework that we're working in will probably provide us at least with some better ways to discriminate what could be a very optimistic type of commitment to a new managerial doctrine, a new marketing doctrine, a new economic doctrine that is necessarily better, because, well, it's hard to sell an idea without claiming that it's better, right? And given that you're in the area of selling, this can sometimes lead to some hasty decisions. So that's about all that I had to say about philosophy. I mean, there are various things that we could keep on discussing, and I think in terms of texts to read, I didn't provide a bibliography because I took from various different sources, but I put two texts. I gave two texts to Dr. Henderson, written by Peter Singer on ethics, the idea of practical ethics. I recommend reading chapter 1 of the book Practical Ethics that's on the Moodle platform, as well as the general presentation of ethics written by Peter Singer, and the book on the structure of scientific revolutions by Thomas Kuhn is always an interesting read. It's a philosophical theory of scientific development and change, but it's also a type of scientific theory of history as applied to the production of scientific truths. Because, as I said, Kuhn is not one who wanted to espouse necessarily the virtues of change. I just want to share quickly my own experience in terms of doctoral studies. I went to France from Canada to do my master's, and then did my PhD. I think that I've had a considerable fortune to study with some of the great French masters who've made me into a missionary of French culture, a conveyor of French culture wherever I go. Now, this wasn't necessarily part of the deal, but that's what I became through the process of studying with them. But, well, the process is no easy ride. It wasn't for me. There were a lot of emotional ups and psychological downs. One should be careful. One has to be careful. But my experience was getting the doctorate to work, really, to define my position, which is a little bit different from your experiences. And I think perhaps the old approach in France to doing a doctorate is that, well, you were already established as a teacher giving the philosophy class in high school, and then you went on to do the doctorate. I think it's probably a better relationship to doctoral work to already have something firm and solid before beginning it. But that's not a fundamental necessity or essential condition sine qua non, right, as they say. So the experience and hardship of creating new knowledge is shared amongst all serious PhD programs, and it's really a pleasure to have met you and hear how involved you are with your own research. And it's fundamental to understand that no university and no dissertation supervisor owes anything to the candidate over and above the terms set out in the contract. It's the PhD candidate who owns everything to the task, right? The research project, the field, but not owing as debt, but as commitment, I think. And with commitment, many dissertation supervisors will then give much, and indeed a lot, to the candidate in the process of elaborating the dissertation. So once again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak of philosophy to business people. I think there are certain historical reasons that can explain why this opportunity has emerged, but I do hope that philosophers can spend more time sharing the knowledge instead of simply defending their field. Thank you.